Hello and welcome to episode 126 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. Today, my good friend Marissa from Chicago will be back on the show for the second time in as many weeks. We'll be continuing our conversation about whether Disney has messed up Star Wars, a conversation which we started in last week's episode. We've focused mostly on the theme parks up to this point, and that is where we'll start off today. But we'll end by talking about Disney's Star Wars movies and television shows. Before we get started, this episode is going live on June 29th, which is the day before my birthday. I'll be celebrating at Walt Disney World. You probably already have figured out that. There are going to be plenty of vlogs from the festivities, and I really hope that I have some great stories as well. Since it is my birthday, I would like to ask for everyone to donate to the Trevor Project by heading to orlandoparkstop.com/charity. This is Alicia Stella's fundraising effort for Pride Month. Since she was nice enough to come on our show a few weeks ago, I would love to make sure that her appearance nets a lot of donations for such a good cause. Go to orlandoparkstop.com/charity and mention Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty in the comments. Now let's bring Marissa back on the show. Thanks for being here, Marissa.
Thank you so much for having me back.
We are picking up on the topic from last week when we are discussing, did Disney mess up Star Wars? We are right now talking specifically about in the parks, but we will get to movies and TV shows in just a few minutes. I want to continue in Star Wars Galaxy's Edge right now. Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run is a fun ride. As a secondary ride in a major land, it definitely works. I don't know if we were necessarily promised, but we were certainly teased that there were going to be multiple missions on this ride, and it has become too monotonous for people who have been there even one or two times. This is not a ride that has a huge amount of re-rideability. If they did something like with Star Tours, where they made it a different mission every time you're there, or even if they just rotated missions throughout the year, obviously most people go the same time of year, so maybe do 13 missions so that it can rotate every month or something like that. What do you think about that, Marissa? I just feel this ride has gotten stale way too quickly.
I totally agree. I think that having new missions and fresh missions would really help the ride a lot. I mean, like you said, adopting some sort of format like Star Tours would be perfect. You get on the ride, it's a new course that you're kind of going through. Slightly new tweak on the mission would be fun. It can still be all about coaxium, but if you're just in a different place. It reminds me, there was a pod racing video game that I had as a child. And you got to pick your different courses. So you're still, at the end of the day, pod racing, right? But you get to visit all these different planets. And if they could do something like that, I think that would be really successful.
This is a ride I don't even think about doing very much anymore. It doesn't even cross my mind to see what the wait time is for Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run. Another thing that I wish they would do with this ride is, now that it has been a few years, and I know it still gets long waits, but if you're in that last room where they have the game board set and you're actually looking like you're inside the Millennium Falcon from the movies, they got to find a way to let you take some more pictures in there. They don't have to be rushing you so much. This isn't a problem with the cast members. The cast members are doing their job. They're doing what they're told. But I just feel like there should be some sort of policy where maybe we let a few more people in there so that you have a couple minutes to take pictures sitting in that iconic space, because that's what you want. Those pictures are more important to most visitors than the ride on the Millennium Falcon, because vacations are different than they were 15, 20 years ago. A lot of people want to have those Instagrammable moments, but even if they don't, that's something that's from the Star Wars that they loved when they were a kid. That's something from the original trilogy. It's something that's in the sequel trilogy. So everybody knows it. And it should just be something that maybe you get to take a little bit more time and take those pictures.
Yeah, the Millennium Falcon is one of the most iconic sets in all of Star Wars. And even if they figured out some way where, as you were getting into your spot to line up, you walked by and you could sit and take a quick picture and then you move on. I think that would be really smart. And it would certainly entice people to ride, I think, a little bit more if they knew that there was a bit more of a photo op instead of just a rush through. My other thing with this ride is that it's such a toss up as to what your experience is going to actually be. And for me, that doesn't inspire me to wait in the line all that often because you could have a great time on the ride and be with a good group of people who are all having fun, or you could end up with, a bunch of 4-year-olds and you're just kind of rocking all over the place and being thrown about a bit. Or you could end up with people who are taking it way too seriously and it's not as fun. Um, and so to wait in that line for an experience that is pretty varied and not in the way that you want it to be, where it's a different mission, isn't necessarily doing its job to make me want to rewrite it.
You might get stuck as an engineer, you might get stuck as a gunner. Everybody wants to be the pilot, but sometimes you get stuck with an 8-year-old pilot who doesn't know what they're doing. Sometimes you have an 8-year-old pilot who does know what they're doing, though, and that's perfectly fine. But it's weird that it's such a different experience depending on the other people that it makes it less rewritable. You would think a different experience every time would make it more rewritable, but sometimes the other people in your cabin can make it really, really a bad experience, which is why a lot of times if you have a party of 6, then you're like, now we're going to do it because I know this is going to be fun because I know the people who are going to be doing it with me. It also does have a single rider line, but if you don't do single rider, you don't get to see the really cool animatronic of Hondo Inaka. But then on the other hand, sometimes you wait in line to see Hondo Inaka, and then he's down or in B mode, which we talked about last week with Star Wars Rise of the Resistance, that sometimes these animatronics go down and they go down a lot. So this is not the biggest problem with Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, but I think it's the easiest solution, is to just put some more runs in this ride so that it's a different experience every time you try to do it. And that would go a long, long way into making this a better ride.
It definitely would. And, just to be clear, not begrudging the little kids who get to be pilots and are living out their dreams. It is incredibly fun to watch in that aspect, to see them just totally having a blast and enjoying it, to the absolute fullest experience. It's just sometimes, as an adult who is not related to any of these children, I don't necessarily want that experience. Um, if they aren't the most skilled pilots. But hey, kudos to them. I love it. Would never, ever begrudge a child having that experience.
And sometimes the kids are great because they've been playing
Oh,
video games since they've been in the crib. So it is not
yeah.
universally that the young kids are bad at this. A lot of times it's the 40-year-old men who are bad at this. Like, it can be a lot of different people who struggle with this ride, but sometimes when somebody just can't get it, then they're frustrated. Everybody else is frustrated. They waited such a long time for this ride. I know that Sarah Says, my other co-host, she said the first time that she rode it with me, we were both pilots, and she was nervous that she was going to mess it up for me. So the second time she rode it, when my wife Courtney was with us, she was like, I'm going to be the gunner, and then I don't have this pressure on me to be a good pilot. Like, it can go the other way, too. There are a
Yeah.
lot of people.
That's me.
Right.
I'm 110% with Sarah there. I am not the strongest pilot and I know that about myself. So I will happily be gunner or engineer and just enjoy the experience. as opposed to having that pressure and feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm going to ruin this for everyone in this cabin if I am not, a top tier flyer here.
Oga's Cantina used to be one of, if not the hardest reservation to get in Walt Disney World. It was right up there with Be Our Guest and Cinderella's Royal Table and California Grill and Topolino's Brunch. This was a hard reservation. And all of a sudden, it was literally like one day, it was everywhere. Similar to Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run, I think Disney felt that one experience was going to last for a much longer time. And once people have done Oga's Cantina, I don't think they're feeling the pressure to go and do it again. And this is an experience where you're limited to 45 minutes. So you get this hard to get, or at least used to be hard to get, reservation, and you don't have an unlimited amount of time. You can only get 2 drinks. I think they might have changed that recently. But you see basically the same 45 minutes every time you're there. They're really packing this place in like sardines. So my pitch, I know Disney, it's going to be making a little bit less money, but maybe it won't be. How about instead of making reservations so much easier to get, limit it by 6 to 10 reservations an hour? Let people have a little bit more of an experience where maybe they get a table all to themselves. Maybe they don't have somebody shoulder to shoulder with them at the bar. So much of this experience is hearing DJ Rex play the music, hearing the inside jokes. But when all you're hearing are the conversations of the people in the bar with you, you're not getting that experience. I think this is something that they made it very small, they made it very exclusive, but what's happening is that's ending up hurting it.
Yeah, I completely agree. It is, if you're there on a day when it's full, it is very crowded. It is very cramped. And, if you're sitting at that bar, you can't move without kind of nudging the person next to you and you feel kind of bad. And you are mostly hearing other people talk as opposed to getting the atmosphere of the environment. So I think that limiting it, cutting the capacity would be a big help. I also would love to see them add some more food items.
That was what I was going to say next. Awesome. I'm so glad you added that. They absolutely need to add more food items.
Yeah, like let me have a snack while I'm sitting there. I want a little variety. I think they have one option right now of food, and it's kind of like a charcuterie board. But, give me a couple options and let me have a snack while I enjoy a drink. Selfishly, I'd like to see the drink menu change a little bit. For people who have been there 4 or 5 times, it's the same limited menu, especially with the non-alcoholic drinks.
I just don't want the non-alcoholic drinks going away. I don't want them
Yeah.
reducing the number of non-alcoholic drinks because neither of us drink, but I've gone to Oga's Cantina a lot. I love to try the different non-alcoholic drinks. Adding food to this experience would be the thing that would change it, that would make it a must-have reservation again, and Disney would be making more money because now everybody who goes there would be getting their 2 drinks and at least one of those food items. They would be getting them. You make one of them something special. I know Disney thinks there is nothing that people love more than a charcuterie board, but if you would have something like a slider, or there's so many different things they could do in that Star Wars universe. Ronto wraps are so popular. Maybe you have a special Ronto wrap that you can only get in Oga's Cantina, and now you have something special. You have a reason to go to that bar.
You know what would be really cool for them to do now that Star Cruiser is closed? Bring in the blue shrimp. That was their big marketing picture on all their food for Star Cruiser. Bring that over to Oga's as a little appetizer thing. And people are going to want it just to try it for the novelty of it. and the fact that, they thought it was gone. The people who did do Star Cruiser, who did try these foods, and they're like, ah, now I can never have this again. Well, now if you go to Oga's, you can purchase it again. So I think that that could bring in some more money that way too.
And then you're taking the thing that failed and using it to your advantage to make money in another area of your resort. There just has to be a reason why this went from being a must have reservation to being available all the time. I could go, I bet you right now, I'm going to do it right now. I'm going on my phone, and I bet you I can make an Oga's for tomorrow afternoon. And it is the summertime, but all right, here we go. Check dining availability. By the way, Be Our Guest has a lot of availability tomorrow as well, so that's another problem that we're going to have to discuss at some point
Should I
in
pretend to
the
be shocked
future.
by that?
um Oh, I stand corrected. No Ogas tomorrow afternoon. But it is available a lot. I got it not this May, but the past May, on May the 4th, like 2 or 3 days beforehand. And that just should not happen. This has lost a lot of its popularity in a very, very short amount of time. And Disney needs to fix that. Now, Marissa, before we move on to the movies and the TV shows, is there anything else in the theme parks that you feel Disney is doing wrong with Star Wars?
This is more of just a Galaxy's Edge in itself issue. I would love to see more seating areas in Galaxy's Edge. Right now, really the only place for you to sit is either in Ronto Roasters, which during the day before it closes is usually pretty full, or over by Rise of the Resistance, there are some little like boxes you can sit on, but there's nothing really to look at over there. So I would really love if they, I mean, just a couple benches to make it easier to just enjoy the area instead of having to sit kind of on the walls. That would be nice.
And over by Rise of the Resistance, the problem is so many people have to sit there because they're waiting for their lightning lane time, or they're waiting for somebody who's riding the ride because they're doing a child swap or something like that. And it really is always crowded on those seats, on those benches. Now, this is a problem that's not necessarily a Star Wars or a Galaxy's Edge problem. Disney needs more benches. Disney needs more shade. Disney needs
Hmm.
more seating. That is something they have done away with over the past few years, and that is definitely a problem that needs to be addressed.
I do have one other thing that I just thought about. Can we talk about the phenomenon or lack of phenomenon of the blue and green milk that Disney really, really wanted to be like Star Wars' butterbeer and it to be this like hugely popular thing? And it's just not.
And nobody
Like for
cares about it.
no one wants it.
I
There's
was
never a
looking
line.
at Facebook earlier today, and somebody in one of the groups asked, "So, where do you get the blue and green milk in Galaxy's Edge?" And it wasn't until then that I remembered that it existed.
Yeah, I almost completely forgot about it until just now.
And they're like, "How much does it cost?" And I was like, "Is it $8? I think it's $8." And I'm like, "I don't know. That sounds high, but I think it's $8." And I couldn't even remember the last time I got one. And yeah, they pushed this so hard and nobody cares.
Mm-mm.
I don't know if I want them to get rid of it or just add more drinks to that stand. Like maybe you can get the blue and the green milk, but it's definitely a waste because there's never a line. Yeah, that's funny. I didn't even think about blue and green milk when preparing for this episode because I just don't think about it anymore.
Yeah. I don't know
Wow.
if it needs to be like revamped, like if they need to go back to the drawing board and revamp the actual ingredients and composition of the milk to make it more appealing. Like I don't know if there's a way to fix it or if they just say, "Hey, you know what? We tried, it's not that popular. let's move those cast members over to Ronto Roasters, and then we can sell blue and green milk
Ooh.
there if people want it. But that way, Ronto Roasters can stay open all day.
And then you can get rid of that green and blue milk station. If you want, you can do something else with it too. But if they sort of blew that up and made that a wider walkway, because that's right where Kylo Ren does his little show.
Hmm.
So, boy, I'm telling you, that might be a really good idea to just move that over to Ronto Roasters and sort of combine the two things.
Hire us, Disney. Come on.
They couldn't afford us. Anyway, um,
I'll take my payment in Ronto wraps.
that was a really, really good addition. And I'm glad that you brought up that lack of phenomenon because it really has not been very successful. I also think they do need to update the merchandise more that's available in Doc Ondar's Den of Antiquity and is available in the marketplace. But I don't think that's the biggest problem. And I don't think you can argue that the lightsabers. I don't think you could argue that the lightsabers and the droids haven't been a gigantic success for Disney because they obviously have been a big success. So they're doing that very, very well. Selfishly, I would say please make them cheaper, but that's just because I want to buy one. There is no reason for Disney to make them cheaper because they are selling them very, very frequently. It can be harder to get a reservation to make a lightsaber than it is to drink at Oga's. So that's a big thing. I think we could argue that they need a sit down restaurant in Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, but we're not really talking about what they don't have. We're trying to perfect what they do have. And I want to move on here for a few minutes. This is where I'm hoping that we don't pick up some of the wrong type of internet people because I want to have a serious conversation about whether Disney has messed up the movies and the television shows or where they have made mistakes even when they're doing a good job. Now, I want to say before we start this, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, both Marissa's favorite and my favorite Star Wars movie were both released after Disney took over Star Wars. So we are not just attacking Disney Star Wars for no reason. We definitely have liked a lot of what they've done. So why don't you talk about Rogue One and why it is your favorite Star Wars movie?
Rogue One is an absolute cinematic masterpiece. Let's just get that out of the way right now. I love the way that it focuses on the people. You know, Star Wars, I love Star Wars, but it can be so easy to lose focus on like the people who are on the ground fighting this fight who don't have the magic powers to back them up that you see, you know, kind of as the main characters in the rest of the movies. And so it was a really fresh take on the Star Wars universe, putting these people in the forefront. And it's also really unique because you go into this movie, I don't want to give away major spoilers, but you kind of know what happens because they're telling this story that happens before A New Hope. So you kind of have an idea of what happens, and they still manage to make it thrilling and exciting and surprising. And it has, without a doubt, one of the best scenes with Darth Vader in the entire Star Wars universe. And you could just tell that every bit of it was done with such care. They used practical effects, they used shots from the original trilogy. Everything about it is so well done. I mean, you know, I could talk about this forever.
I will say my only problem with Rogue One isn't really a problem with Rogue One. It is that in the timeline of the Star Wars movies, we're seeing Darth Vader in Rogue One about 15 or 20 minutes before we see him in A New Hope. And he is so much cooler and so much more intimidating in Rogue One than he is 15 minutes later because of how much technology has improved since they recorded everything. But I will say that Rogue One is definitely a very good Star Wars movie. I know it's one that's usually united almost everybody, no matter how they feel. about the other Disney Star Wars movies. I know that I could be very controversial, and I don't like, just don't. I'm just going to say that my favorite Star Wars movie is The Last Jedi, but let's not have the comments section go too crazy, although it might help the algorithm. So, you know what? Go nuts.
Have at it.
But what I'm going to say is we're not just going completely negative on Disney Star Wars. I think what bothers me about the Disney Star Wars movies, if there is one thing, it is that they listened too much to the online back and forth. And that's why we ended up with The Rise of Skywalker, which I think is a very flawed movie. Even though when I was sitting there watching it in the theaters, I loved every minute of it. But that's because it was cinematically beautiful, it looked great, and it was exciting, and it was distracting you from realizing that none of it made any sense. But then once I was driving home from the theater, I was like, that was a lot. I feel like a lot of people will say the problem with Disney Star Wars is that they didn't listen to the fans, when I feel like one of the problems with Disney Star Wars is that they listen too much to the fans. Like, there are parts of Rise of Skywalker that I can watch right now and see why that line of dialogue was put in there to address which online complaint about The Last Jedi.
Absolutely. And I feel like my main issue ties in very closely with this, which is that you can tell in the sequel trilogy that they did not have a complete story arc before they started The Force Awakens. They had an idea for The Force Awakens and they made that. And then they said, well, now where can we go? And then they made The Last Jedi and said, well, now where can we go? If you're making a trilogy, you need to plan out the trilogy before you start production on the first piece of it. Otherwise, you're not going to have a complete story arc. These characters' arcs are not going to be fulfilled in the right way. And coming at it from that perspective, it frustrates me. I wish they could have found a way to kind of unite the films in a complete story before they started.
You say they had a plan with A Force Awakens, and that was because they had A New Hope. And it was basically the same storyline, but that's okay. Nobody seemed to complain about The Force Awakens. So, in my humble opinion, the internet said Rey's a Mary Sue and she never trained. So in The Rise of Skywalker, we get, come on, Rey, we have to fight. No, I have to train. I have to train more. I have to be in the woods and doing this whole thing. You know, the neckbeards didn't like Rose Tico. So it's like, Rose, come on. And she's like, no, I'm going to stay on this planet and not bother anybody who might be upset that there's an Asian woman in these movies. And the one thing they couldn't control is that Carrie Fisher passed. The first movie, The Force Awakens, that was the Han-centric movie. Then The Last Jedi was the Luke-centric movie. So I'm assuming that the ninth movie was supposed to be a Leia-intensive movie, and then they just really picked the wrong order, and it had nothing to do with anything but real life, and they did the best they could to make up for that situation. But the combination of not having a set in stone plan and them just absolutely panicking to the backlash from The Last Jedi really made it a very incoherent end to that story. I do like that there's now talk that they're going to do another Rey movie, so maybe this can help, because that's not going to be our last taste of Star Wars. But let's see how that goes here.
Yeah, I think all the characters in the movies had so much potential. You know, Rey and Finn and Poe, they were all great characters, and they could have done so much with them. And I do hope we get to see more of them. I know that's really up in the air, but I do feel like a lot of people were very upset with how Luke ended up. It just caused a lot of anger that I think was kind of unjustified. I mean, in my, again, just personal opinion, I think it makes a lot of sense that Luke would become this jaded character. I think it fits. I didn't really see any issues with it at the time. I think probably my biggest issue character-wise is Kylo Ren. I think Adam Driver did a great job, but I just don't think he was very intimidating. Um, and he came off, with the way the writing was, again, not the actor's fault, but there were times when he came off more whiny and like throwing a temper tantrum than like this actual imposing imperial figure like you see from Darth Vader. I know they had a thing where they're like, well, he's not actually going to be the real villain, but he didn't necessarily feel that believable as a real villain when they wanted you to believe he was. I know people love Kylo, so I'm preparing for backlash on this one because he gets so much love, but it's just not for me personally.
I understand that you're saying that he was a little bit whiny and you didn't necessarily believe him as this super strong villain. But counterpoint, have you seen the prequels?
That's a whole different conversation.
It's not like Anakin avoids that, you know?
That's Anakin, not Vader.
There is a lot of Ben Kylo crossover when there's not a lot of Anakin Vader crossover. So I do see what you're saying there. Let's move on to the television shows because I think this is something they've basically done right. They've almost knocked all of these out of the park. I think the only criticism you could maybe have is they're like, we're going to call this the Book of Boba Fett, but it's really going to be more Baby Yoda show. However, all in all, these shows have been really good, and you really love Andor.
Yeah, I think that they have absolutely knocked it out of the park with the TV shows. I think that, the longer episodic format allows them to really explore these characters and explore these stories in a way that you don't really see from a movie where they're sharing so much screen time, trying to wrap up so many plots in, 2.5 hours. And I think every single one of them has been done really well. And I know, there's always rumors of there's going to be this TV show next and what are they going to do next? And I'm looking forward to it. I think that they've been really, really solid.
Yeah, honestly, maybe this was the worst place to end because I don't really have any complaints either. They caught lightning in a bottle with Baby Yoda. I'm sure that that was one of those moments when they saw that first concept art for that character where they just knew that they had a hit on their hands, and everything else has really sort of gone in that same direction. The Obi-Wan Kenobi show, I really liked it. I know there are some people who didn't really like it. That's Marissa's favorite character of all time, so there's no way she wasn't going to like it. So I definitely think this is an area where they have done almost all good. So to summarize the last two episodes, Marissa, did Disney mess up Star Wars?
Oh, I think that even though we've shared plenty of things that we would like to change, ultimately, I don't think they messed up Star Wars because the IP is still so strong and they have so many places they can go from here that they have not torpedoed it into the ground. There is still so much interest in it. There's still so much they can do with it that I don't think that they have messed it up.
After everything we've said over the last two episodes, I am going to say that with the exception of The Rise of Skywalker, there is nothing that they can't fix. There's nothing that's so bad that they can't get out of it. Even the Star Cruiser, like they literally just got out of it. They cut bait with it. And they said, we're not going to do this. And hopefully this new Rey movie, I'm not looking for a retcon, but I'm looking to maybe just leave The Rise of Skywalker as it's not the last thing. It's not the last Star Wars taste we have in our mouth for that storyline. And let's see where it goes, because once that's episode 9 of 12, all of a sudden it's not as important as when it's episode 9 of 9. And they put so much pressure on themselves to make 9 of 9 something epic that I think we ended up getting something very flawed. But I will say that right now, Star Wars is better off than it has been probably at any point over the last 30 years at least. The prequels were not liked. People did not like the prequels, and now they are almost universally loved. I don't think there was any damage from the sequels or any of the things in the theme park that can't be made up if you can get past Attack of the Clones. So I'm going to say that the state of Star Wars, in my opinion, is stronger now than it was before Disney bought it. So you can't really say Disney messed up Star Wars.
Yeah, I agree. Have they been perfect with it? No. But I don't think anyone could have been. I mean, George Lucas wasn't perfect with Star Wars. We've all seen the prequels. Like you said, Attack of the Clones exists. He was not perfect. So I think that sometimes people are less willing to give Disney the grace to make the missteps and learn and grow from them than they have been in the past. But I do think that, like you said, they haven't done anything that they can't really improve upon.
Marissa, it's always so great to have you on the show. Having you on 2 weeks in a row, I know everybody is really excited about that. And I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
This has been episode 126 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. As I mentioned earlier, it's my birthday week. Do me a favor and make sure you're subscribed to the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel and add some likes and comments while you're at it. That would really mean a lot to me. We'll return with a brand new episode next Thursday. Until then, have a great week.